Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Lydia.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I hope I'm saying that properly because we just kicked right into it without me even asking.
Yes, my name is Lydia Stevens. Yes.
So Lydia, if I was going to ask you, what's one way you would define yourself? How would you define yourself?
A do-it-all person.
I was about to say, with that sigh, it sounded like you do it all.
Yes, I'm a mother and a caretaker and a writer, an author, a host of my own podcast. I'm a freelance developer. Yes, I do it all.
Which one do you care about the most?
Being a mother and a caretaker. Yes.
That's a good answer. I totally forgot about those options that you tossed out. What's one that you like? I guess you would say I would talk about the writing. I would say that seems like a very, very niche thing to get into, which I think is why it's so interesting to me. Is like, I will probably never admit it, like maybe 2 years ago, but just recently I've been like, oh, I'm into poetry. Like I've always kind of written a little bit of poetry off to the side, kept the book hidden away from everybody. Like nobody knows what's behind the dark curtain.
I think we all have that box of, nobody can see this, but yes, I mean, writing is something that I've always known that I love to do. And then as, I got all grown up and everything like that, people, what do you want to do with your life? Well, I didn't know. And I got married right out of high school instead of going to college. And that was a mistake. I know I should rephrase that. That's not going to be a mistake for everybody, but it was for me. And then, once the marriage ended and all of that happened, I really had to look at, well, who am I and what do I want to do with my life? Because I was a stay-at-home mom, which I wanted to do when my son was born. But then I found myself having to be, a mom and a provider and, a breadwinner and all of that. And I said to myself, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to go get a degree. And I had started my degree a few years earlier, but I didn't really know what direction I was going in. It just seemed like, a waste of money to go get this degree that I might not use. And so I said, I'm going to get a degree in English and creative writing. And everybody around me said, are you nuts?
It's like getting a degree in philosophy. There's like a stigma attached to it.
What are you going to do with it? And everyone assumes that I'm going to be a teacher. And at the age of 35, I don't have patience for that. I want to write. I want to be a writer. I want to be in the industry, the publishing industry. So whether that's writing or editing or literary, I've interned at a literary agency. So, something in the publishing industry has always fascinated me, and especially being an author. I mean, that's the end goal is, writing and publishing my own books. And I am self-published, but I think that the game has always been find the agent and be traditionally published. That is one of my career goals. So I went back to school and I got the degree, and then I started doing internships. As I said, I've interned at a literary agency. I've interned as an acquisitions assistant, and for the last 5 years, I've been freelance developmental editing to kind of make ends meet. So this past year, I just started this podcast, the REDinkwriters podcast, and you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. And we bring tips to the writing industry about writing. So it's from writers for writers. So I know it's really easy to find all of these, all of this information online about writing, but it's sorting out what's useful and what's just so repetitive. Like everyone knows the show don't tell rule, but what does that mean? So that's kind of what we're trying to do with this podcast. And it's just the co-host, Sandy Butchers, and I wanting to say to writers, we're people too. We are struggling with this career as much as you are, and we understand how frustrating it can be. And we also understand how much celebration comes with this job. So that's what the podcast is all about, is trying to reach writers from any level of their career, not just your beginner writers or your well-established writers. We want the middlemen. as well.
It's kind of interesting how we value information, value knowledge, value anything in the world. Really, it's kind of, it seems like a little bit topsy-turvy, the most work you can possibly put into something. And I'm not saying YouTube creators such as like Logan Paul's or any of these types are not hardworking individuals. It probably takes a lot to get half the world pissed off at you. But at the same time, in the ideals of writing, for instance, any kid, there's a very select few that want to be writers. And I think we can probably enhance that a little bit more if you took time to, I feel like they shove it too much into your face in school. And it's not necessarily like, it's more about techniques, which I think are important, obviously, but it's also like, you're supposed to have those slip ups. You're supposed to have those errors and stuff too. You're like, for me, when I write, and I faked my whole entire art history project was, you're supposed to write about going to a museum. And
Yeah.
I was like, so is it a field trip? And the guy's like, yeah, we're going to travel 3 hours to Washington, D.C. and see an art history thing. Or you can choose to go on your own with like a parent, or you can go by yourself if you have keys to drive. This is like my first college course. And I'm like, I do not want to fucking go 3 hours away from my home on a Saturday to go do that. I was like, I got other stuff I want to do. So I sitting up in my bed with a coffee, just writing, just typing. And I was like, I went with my mom. We went to the art history museum and I named the specific museum. And I was like, I don't know what art's in there though. So like, I could think of probably a bunch of things that today would sell so quick, like a duck with a bassoon. It's gonna sell. It's art. And I get it. But so what I did was I just straight up typed, and I just looked at pictures at the museum, saw what was inside there, like a digital tour. And then I just was like, I would walk up to this one and I would explain the painting of a fruit bowl on a table. And I said, what's interesting, where my mind goes, is what type of fabric of the cloth that is on the table that the fruit bowl is sitting on, and also what is happening around it. Picture this scenario as I'm talking to you in a Zoom call right now. There could be nothing. I could not be wearing pants and you wouldn't know. I am wearing pants, but I'm just saying that's what you see through this perceptive view of a square box. And I enhanced on that and talked about it. And then I ended up reading it over to a parent and be like, hey, does this sound like interesting enough? Yeah. I was like,
Yeah. And I think that's a lot like writing, is that we get so focused on the technicality of writing, we forget how to have fun with writing, and how I'm so passionate about it. I mean, I can sit down and start writing and just go for hours, and I forget that I have a child I need to feed it. And no, I feed my kid, but all jokes aside, it's just something you can completely get lost in. And I remember talking with Sandy, and our podcast started where we were critique partners of the writing, and we would sit and we would do write-ins, and then we would come back and reread something to each other and say, hey, does this sound, and I just remember there was something that she happened to comment on, and I just said, oh, I've got this. And she piped up and she goes, oh, but I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And so we started laughing, because that has since become our motto for the podcast. I've got this, but I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And that is really sort of very true for any writer and anybody who's pursuing something that they're passionate about. Is you have to have that attitude of, I've got this, I can do this. Yeah, it might be hard, and yeah, I'm going to trip and I'm going to fall and I'm going to stumble and I'm going to have to pick myself back up again and again and again. But I think we get so focused on success being measured by monetary value that we forget that your success is the fact that you're doing it, that you are pursuing something that you're passionate about. And so coming back to when I was deciding that I wanted to be an author for my career, and that I wanted to be in the publishing industry, everybody told me I'm nuts. I have heard you don't belong in this industry. You're a single parent. What are you doing? You should have the regular 9-to-5 job because it's more stable. I've been told, go back to work, get a real job. All of these things, which have just been those roadblocks to pursuing this career. And I keep having to remind myself, what am I passionate about? And my personal author motto is feel your fire and let it feed your soul. And I have to keep coming back to that again and again and again in my career and what I do and how I define myself, because otherwise I would just give up. A lot of people call writing and publishing a dream. And of course it is. Everybody wants to be on the New York Times bestseller. It starts as a dream. But what happens in this career is, if you're truly passionate about it and you're dedicated to it, it becomes a goal. And I think that's a really big difference that a lot of writers don't correlate the two, because it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. Well, if you start to set a goal for yourself, small goals to obtain that big goal, eventually you're going to get there. So that, defining myself and who I am and what I do, that is what drives me. That's what makes Lydia tick, is, keep trying, keep working, and, don't forget what really, makes me passionate about life. And that's it.
I think it's pretty strange how I look at the world is probably a factor of why is it that everything to get you famous, to get you rich, is constantly shoved into our eyes as doing, you have to do this. And they say that like, well, it's like 1 in a million people get famous, or it's even smaller for artists. It's a very small percentage of musicians that actually take it on to get onto the stage, win that American Idol type scenario, or win Shark Tank, for instance. And then it's like for writers, it's even smaller than that. And I'm like, there's a lot of people that write stuff. There's a lot of New York Times bestsellers. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's not impossible, but the fact is, when you have all that bulged up into your head that you want to do something, I mean, podcasting, for instance, everyone wants to be a famous podcaster.
Everyone wants to be a podcaster, yes.
You can't plan your life like that. I know the scariest thing for people is that you never want to have to worry, because you're going to when you enter the world, but it's like you have to plan your life. Make sure you get a degree. I went to college because someone told me I wasn't college materials. My grandma, she knows
degrees.
I have that authoritative, like, just don't tell me to do something, because I'm gonna end up doing that, even if I'm approving it. Like, if you tell me writing is horrible, I'll be like, writing is amazing. And then if you tell me writing is awesome, I'm be like, what's your points? Because I've seen bad stuff where it doesn't, because it's not that I'm trying to debate or argue, it's that I'm trying to find a conversation here, find a key, because nobody ever brings in the other talking point. It's surrounding yourself with people that think like you, act like you, which is good. If you're in a writing community and you're starting one, there are so many people out there that are like, this is not going to pan out at all, and they need support like that. But the issue is like, we get into more serious groups or something like that are like Democrats, liberal. I'm like, guys, like, what are we doing? We're people down to a basis, you know what I mean? And it gets to like this level where it's like, maybe trying to plan your life is the reason why you're so damn worried. Planning your life, who says you couldn't be dead tomorrow? God forbid it happens, but you don't know what's going to happen the next day. I remember, I live in a beach town, so I plan like, today's my day off, I'm gonna sit in the sun. Then it's like today and it's fucking raining its ass off. I'm like, it's not happening. So why would I try and plan it? You got to kind of take it day by day, but also like, you can't, like, I remember writing in school when I was a kid, and I would always use the word because to start a sentence. And they, like, I mean, to the point where I would not go out to recess anymore, and I would have to write because over and over again. So I was sick of using it. And I'm like, I get it. It doesn't sound very good on a paper, but if you look through any of my episode details and stuff, I created my own. I'm just giving you a quick synapse of what this thing is about. I can't speak with pen to paper like most people can. I speak with my words. I speak with the things that I say. Everybody's got a different platform to be able to get their thoughts and emotions out. But when you add in this, like, here's this style, you're not following this, you're not doing this stanzas. Oh, it's not 2.5 lines. I get it looks pretty, but at the same time, especially in the creative process, it's like when I read it, like if somebody took your work, like the raw original thoughts that you had in your head, and you put it down on a piece of paper, and I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, I know Lydia, this is Lydia. But then if you start going by the styles and the techniques and the critiques of everything that you've learned and kind of forced your hand a certain way, to where I'm not even comfortable writing with my left hand, but you're going to do it, I'll notice that's in the room. It's like two people now. It's one person staring over your shoulder, correcting everything that you do, which in that creative process, I think needs to be tossed out. I think you need to let it go crazy on the piece of paper, and you wait a couple days and you reread it the next day, like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Let me add this. Let me add this. Because Leonardo da Vinci, one of my all-time favorite people, I wish for, if they build a time machine, I could ever go back to see that man work. But no work is ever finished, just left undone, because he believes you can constantly add something to make it better. And that's what I think is something that you need as a person, to always know that there's room for improvement. But at the same time, like, we know so many people that are like, I'm happy where it's at, and it's a good book. But you got to look at it like, man, do you ever just want to be like, I'm okay with this? I want to be like, I can constantly do this to it, and watch it grow and form into something that you wouldn't even think in a million years would hit.
Yeah. I definitely feel that way about my first trilogy that I wrote. I come back to it and I'm like, oh, I should have done this, or I should have done that. And I think the thing is when doing that is, you know what, that book is published. I can unpublish it, and I can change it, and I can republish it. However, where mine is connected to my career and you know, financial stability, that's not going to be lucrative for me to do that. So then I have to take my creativeness and give it another outlet. So another project, or, you know, there's always a story. I have an entire folder on my computer of unfinished stories, you know, things that I've started. And I come back to those when I don't have one that's just in my head and must get out on paper right now, and I want to be creative. I come back to that folder and I say, okay, what are we doing? Am I taking pieces of this story and putting it in this story? Or am I taking, you know, some of this over here and maybe starting something over here? So there's creativity is, I think if you're looking for an outlet and you are a creative person, it never ends. And we see this a lot in the writing industry with what's called writer's block. And I understand that there are things in life that people, you know, it stops them from writing, you know, stress, job, kids, family, whatever. There is something that can always get in the way of writing, but creative people find ways to be creative. So for example, if I have, you know, the 10-year-old and the caretaking my grandmother and, you know, the dog, or whatever, all of these things coming at me that I can't sit at a computer for 4 hours and write, I have other ways that I can be creative. Like I enjoy doing jigsaw puzzles to relax at night. And a lot of times I say, you know what, I can't write during the day because I have all these other responsibilities. I'm going to write at night. And once everybody goes to bed and, you know, nobody's getting in, you know, interrupting or anything like that. And then I get into bed and I'm exhausted. So that is one of those things, that is one of those instances where a creative person is going to find a way to get that out. And, you know, I'll knit, I'll do jigsaw puzzles. I love fantasy themed jigsaw puzzles, and those help with the creative process of the story. You know, I'm a 35-year-old who likes to color. I love those little coloring books with colored pencils, and, you know, so you find a way to express yourself. And I think coming back to one of the things that you said of, you know, not enjoying somebody standing over your shoulder while you're creating and things like that. And I definitely can completely understand that, because as an editor, one of my jobs is to look at somebody's work and say, this doesn't quite work in the story. But that is not because I want to change their story. That is not because I want to take away from their author voice, something that
crafting it to what it's supposed to be.
It's because I want it to be the best, the absolute best that it could possibly be, because I want that client, that author, that writer to succeed as well. And so, you know, if you've got a character with blue eyes in chapter 1 and green eyes in chapter 13, you know, me saying, you have a congruency issue here, that's not because I want to change that author. That's because I want, like I said, I want them to improve their writing, because you can always get better. You can always be working at it. And I want them to be able to put out into the world the best book that they can put out. And maybe that book won't be perfect. And as you said, there's something that could always be changed about it, but that's also a matter of perception. And that's, you know, what was the author's vision compared to a reader who thinks, oh, maybe they should have done it this way. But that's the beauty of the imagination, is an author is supposed to provoke their reader's imagination. So in a book, you might have the, red barn in a book, as opposed to a movie where you know exactly what brick color red that barn is. So when you get into the whole debate of books versus TV and movies, there is something absolutely amazing about being able to put a story on a TV or in a movie and be able to see that for yourself. In a book, you still have that little bit of leeway where you're like, is it brick red? Is it a burgundy red? Is it, you know, so you let your reader become a part of that process, that creative process. And that's what I love about writing.
I'm laughing because someone that you follow too as well, Armand, he writes a lot. He was on here, and I picked the worst movie in my head that I've always used as an example as a really bad movie. And I was like, Bird Box is a horrendous piece of trash. And then he just goes, my buddy wrote the book for Bird Box. I was like, well, I didn't like Bird Box. I don't like Sandra Bullock. There's just something about her face where I'm like, there's too much.
Face is wrong. Oh my goodness.
So I was like, all right, well, I'll read the book. I did read the book. The book was 1,000 times better. It left a lot more suspenseful. I think it was a little bit, it's like, let's throw Sandra Bullock at it and it turned into a bad movie. So Armin knows I love it. But at the same time, I look at things like, for instance, when you're saying in the what I was trying to hint at was the creative process.
Mhm.
When a person's coming to an editor to edit something or to look over something, is that they feel that it's complete, but it might need an adjustment or a third eyes perspective. I'm talking about, like, my thoughts are that I was talking to a couple of Greek mythology professors that were kind of going back and forth. Like, there were so many creatives and philosophers back in the day. Now everybody's a philosopher. I'm like, but how many people are being forced creatives? How many thoughts that you have are actually your own thoughts or something that someone put into your head? There are thousands of times I'm writing something, or there's thousands of times I'm doing this, and it's from stuff that I've learned. We've all learned words, of course, but techniques down to styles, down to this, and you start realizing you're copying mannerisms and not, there's comedians that do it all the time. They pick up mannerisms of people that they follow or people that got them into comedy and stuff like that. Same
Right.
concept when you're in the creative process. You're all kind of structuring, like, oh, I
Mhm.
remember I'm not supposed to do this. I'm not supposed to do that. Let the words flow out and then worry about that afterwards. Because once you get
Exactly.
the idea out on paper and you're able to manifest it into something and then be like, okay, now I'm going to take it to a ghostwriter or an editor or someone like that to be able to, create it, then it turns into this amazing thing that you might see a perspective you didn't even know about, where someone makes an adjustment and it's 1,000 times better. But in that
Exactly.
raw creativity mode, in that mode, you just got, it's like
Mhm.
taking a paintbrush and just slapping a white canvas. You just got to go until you get whatever's inside of you out, and then
And
you
I
craft it.
Yeah, and I think that is where you start to look for the author's voice, and you can definitely see that in a story. What makes that story uniquely theirs? Because there isn't anything in the writing industry which has not been done. Any trope, you've got your ghosts or your vampires or your werewolves or your in suspense, you've got a political thrill. There is nothing in this world that has not been done. So how do you then promote the creative process? And that is, you make it your own. You bring your own experiences, your own the things that you've done in your life, the way that you think or feel about them, and you put all of that energy into your writing so that it then becomes your story, and it is something unique about that story, belongs to you and your creative process. So it's not the same old story. And so that, I think, is, and especially the responsibility of an editor is to find that first and say, this is what is inherently their creative process, and this is sacred. This is, we need to preserve we can definitely work on the mechanics and the technical aspect of the story, but we don't try to destroy this. And I have had an editor who has done that, and it was a horrible experience, and it was one of the times where I really considered, maybe I'm not good enough to do this, and I should just go back and get that 9 to 5 job. And I had to sit with it for a long time and think to myself, you know what, this is just a bad working experience. This does not define who I am as a writer. And it does not define who I am when I'm creating. And I need to move on, and I need to find a different editor. And I did. So when you have that experience of somebody just completely trying to eradicate the voice, or change that entirely so that it's their voice, that's when you need to really assess whether that working relationship is actually working. Um, and that is in any in self-publishing, if you're working with an editor, or traditional publishing. You see sometimes a lot of cookie cutter novels because traditional publishers know that's what sells. But one of the things that people forget to look for is, where's the voice, where's that creative voice that is that author's creative process. So that is very, very important to protect that. And they say, when you're first drafting, sit, write the book, write it how you want to write it how it comes out of your mind and onto the page, write it, no holds bar, just sit and write, and then go back and do the technicality of, you know cleaning it up, editing it, things like that, so that it definitely has your imprint on it. So I 100% agree with you on that, of, just don't let anything get in the way of that process.
I
Blank
do.
canvas.
I mean, I do have a bookcase. I don't really read any of the books that are in it.
Mhm.
I can read very, very well, but at the same time, it's also a tasking process for a kid with ADHD to be able to sit and really take grasp. You have to get soaked into it. And let me tell you, I can't read a Twilight book, not because I don't like the content of it. I would love vampires and werewolves. That's awesome to me. I like the fantasy stuff. More about medieval stuff. I really like hearing about some dude get his head chopped off, and then there's this great war that happens over some type of dispute that I don't know about, but I like the
Yeah,
content.
Game of
Um,
Thrones. Whoops, there's the
you
phone.
want me to pause it?
Can you? Because it's gonna. I'm good.
But one type of book, like besides medieval stuff, that I did get super interested into. So I spent a lot of my elementary school, I was in this class called enrichment, which is like you take extracurriculars for slow readers, but I wasn't slow. Like the teacher could tell, she was like, you just don't want to read. I was like, because I'm sitting down, I'm 10 years old. I want to go punch something. Like I want to punch a wall. I want to punch a teacher. I want to do anything I could possibly, not like in an aggressive way, just out of, you ever see a kid that gets so, like I watched my little nephew, he's 3 now. There's his little brother just laying down on the ground, just having a good old time staring up at the ceiling like babies do. And he just takes his heel and hits his heel right on the kid's forehead. I'm like, what? Because he was so excited. He just couldn't contain it. He had to hit somebody or something. And that's what kids do. So that's what I mean.
I have a 10-year-old. Yeah, I know that feeling well, especially when I am trying to sit here at the computer and focus and
I just picture like a left hook coming in and hitting you.
and he's coming in the office and mom. It reminds me of that Family Guy episode
Stewie.
with Stewie, and I'm what?
Wow.
Hi. Like, he just had to say hi. Yeah,
So
totally.
this enrichment class, for instance, she was like, why don't you just go out there and pick a book that you want to read? So I was like, I'm going to pick a book that has either a lot of pictures or just very, very short pages so I can get these books and these stuff done. I was way behind. And I found Graphic Universe, which is like a comic scenario of all these old style. Like I learned about Gaia, Mother Earth. I learned about Zeus. That's how I got into the whole Greek mythology thing. And then eventually when I hit 11th grade, they were like, this was probably from like 5th grade up. I was just bailing on Graphic Universe to help me out there. But I hit 11th grade and the teacher's like, you're in high school now. We're in a English literacy class. Like you need to pick a book that you're going to read for the first 15 minutes of class, like we do, that isn't filled like Graphic Universe. And I was like, okay, how do I do that? She's like, use the Dewey Decimal System. And it's the one time I've ever used it in my entire life. I just stuck to like the first like A through whatever. And I didn't go super into it because I'm like, this is complicated. Do people even use it? It's like directions. Nobody asks for directions. You just drive.
Right.
But I ended up finding an author called Rick Riordan who makes the
Love Percy Jackson.
so makes the Percy Jackson
Yeah.
series. But I read a couple of those, and then I ended up finding something I was very, very interested in that I never thought of, and I wish I could remember the guy's name. But the book is called Inside Out, and the very first one I read before that was called Cruise Control, about a brother in high school who was like this star basketball athlete. Everything, it's from his perspective, but his younger brother had severe autism where he couldn't leave a wheelchair and all he would do is drool on himself and groan. He couldn't communicate to everyone. So everyone had to change his diapers and all this stuff. And he was like, I just want my brother to die. And it was like from that perspective that no one ever talks about or ever sees inside of your own mind, that thing. And towards the end, they built a bond and this love. And then I read the sequel to that because he's going off to high school. So he was like, I don't want to leave my mom with this trouble and all this stuff. He's mad his dad left and everything. Giving you a quick synopsis, so bear with me. Then he gets to the other book called Inside Out, and it's from the brother's perspective, the autistic brother who's super smart, but he can't voice his words out. And he's like, I just want to hug you. I just want to do, and it's like this whole like making my skin tingle even talk about it. But I'm like, oh my, and that was one thing I just hooked to where I was like, this is something like you never, that other perspective. And I started realizing a lot of these books with perspectives, like I read all about like not from Nazi soldiers' perspectives to the whole Holocaust thing, not even realizing that some of them were in there because they were afraid that if they disobeyed, they would kill their whole family and everything. I'm like, nobody talks about this in history. Nobody talks about these other perspectives. No one even looks at these types of things. And I realized, oh my God, let's make a show about perspectives.
I read a book in high school and it was very, very dry. It was really difficult to get through. And it was called it was by Howard Zinn. It might have been like A People's Perspective of the United States of America. And it was
burn it all down. That's what it is.
No, and it was US history. And history books are written by the conquerors. We've always known that. So it was a complete history of the United States written from the perspective of those who have been suppressed, oppressed, excuse me, or defeated, so there was a lot in there with indigenous peoples, and there was a lot in there about slavery, and it was, just that completely different. And they even had a chapter in there from the perspective of a slave owner, and how, when after the Civil War, what happened to, and so it was really difficult to get through, because you just want to say, I don't care. But it's even like politics. Like, I will chat with, and I'll put it out there, I'm a Democrat, I will chat with Republicans, not because it's going to change my mind necessarily, but because it's important to really understand why I don't agree with them. What is it about their perspective? What are they thinking that, it's so vehement that it brings about these, it has brought about violence. Why are these people, what makes them tick? Why are they so, this is the hill that they're going to go die on in terms of their beliefs? So it is important to understand other perspectives. I think it's essential, actually, to just being decent human beings to each other, because if we didn't, if we adopt that attitude of it's my way or the highway, we're never going to get along. So yes,
You're a
I really
Democrat?
recommend. I am, yes.
I'm a Republican. Now, I'm so happy I do not have a dog invested in any of those fights, because as soon as they start putting labels, like someone called me a libertarian, I probably agree with a lot of libertarian stuff, but then he calls me libertarian. I'm like, now I'm like, give them all the guns. Everybody needs to. I have that authority issue where I'm like, I don't see the point in choosing a side. I get it if they best fit your views, but then it goes super left, then left even farther. And I'm like, guys, you're just breaking down the groups even more. And I'm like, let's just work together. We're all trying to benefit society, correct? I'm not a piece of shit. I don't think you are either. I think we're all people just trying to live on this earth. And that's why I try and bring in the perspective of aliens, because if we all believe in aliens, there's a bigger thing out there than us, then we can get past our boba tea.
I am a registered Democrat, yes.
I don't think I'm
When people
registered to
ask
vote.
me, yeah, just in terms of being able to vote, because I think that is a civic duty. And when people ask me, I tell them I'm a humanitarian. I'm a people first, politics later.
They got a word for everything.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the condition of the human nature, is we need to put a label on it, define it. What is it? What is it that makes this work? That's, yeah.
It's like cults. Some of the cults are exactly the same, and then they branch off into like, oh, we're all gonna kill ourselves and wear Nike shoes. You're like, hang on a second, I like that one.
That is a bit extreme, yes, but no, I definitely wouldn't say as a humanitarian that I'm going to join a cult, but
I think the education system sometimes a cult, because they got me every day to stand up, put my hand over my chest and say, I pledge allegiance to the flag. And I'm like, hang on a second. Wait, was that brainwashing? I just did it. I didn't even know why.
True.
Troops.
Yeah.
Troops.
Well, I think with the education system in America, yes, I think that it's probably good that they're looking at, there are some students who don't want to stand up and put their hand over their heart and pledge to the flag. I did it. And I did
know.
just
I
because
didn't know I had a choice.
yeah, and I think that's a really big thing that we need to stress into our kids, is that you do have a choice.
I think there's just a lot of people
I
pointing
do
fingers
have
at a lot of other people when it's like, why don't we just
other
be
perspective. I have a lot of friends in the military, family in the military. So that is, I am, here we are again with the labels, an omnist. I'm someone who finds truth in all religion.
I think they all got a piece to the same puzzle.
Yeah. So it's, people might have issue with the one nation under God part of the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, whether you call him God, Buddha, Allah, whoever, Gaia, I think that the pledge is just from that other perspective, it's a sign of respect for something. It's respect for either the soldiers in our military, or, our fellow citizens, or, take a look at what makes us a country. what makes us Americans? What
What makes us people?
if you're going to go down that route, yeah.
See, this is the big thing I think is that everyone has to critique somebody else, and it's just like it's so simple just to because like I feel like a lot of it does probably play with a lot of stress that happens in your own life. You try and deflect a little bit too. But I think it's also a point of like when we get down to the bare necessity, we're living side by side together. Doesn't matter what your party is, doesn't matter what your views are, doesn't matter what this is. It's not going to stop you from understanding or wanting to know more about a person. I mean, we could talk about, like I said, we started off with writing, for instance. It
Right.
doesn't matter. That's why I tell people like to truly, like, it's like Socrates, to truly admit that you know, or to truly understand everything, you have to admit that you know nothing. It's like that. That's a perfect quote because I understand I don't know any types of facts. These are conversations. I don't have a script. I just toss them out and people can sit there, prosecute me for you think this way. I'm like, no, if you look at my very first episode, I think completely different. I've enhanced. I never knew about taxes when I was in high school. Now I know about taxes.
Who does? Who knows about tax? I don't even know how to do taxes. I do taxes every year and it's like a guessing game. Like I wish they
I
would
was
just give
paying
multiple
medical
choice.
insurance and I didn't even have it. I was paying medical tax. I was like, what the heck? What's the $50 for?
Yeah, they should just make taxes multiple choice. Like, did you work this year? Yes, no, undecided.
Mhm. But I think it's important that people talk, people create communities, people create groups, but it gets to a line where it's like, I don't want you in this one because you don't do this. And it's like, I get it because it is a protection thing. When you have like the writing community is so interesting to me because it's so positive. And I guess it's because it's just creative. But like if you get into the podcasting communities, it's like a competition. I guess it's because it's like more seen as like a better like platform to.
I'm going to disagree with you on the positivity. Yes, it's got a very positive atmosphere in the writing community. But when you hit a negative aspect of the writing community, it can be downright nasty.
I just see the writers lifts. I'm like, I don't see a podcast lift. I see follow Friday maybe, but that's like 5 fucking people that unfollow you a minute later. Like it's nothing.
Yeah, no, there, it can be very nasty. You as a writer, there's what we call imposter syndrome, where you're looking at everybody around you and you're like, I'm not as successful as them. I'm not as well known as them. I don't have as many followers. I'm not selling as much books. And that is just, you really need to bring it back to yourself and say, you know what, I'm not in this because of for their career. I'm in this for my career, and my passion and my hobby. And that is where I have to really hold on to my personal author brand of Feel Your Fire, Let It Feed Your Soul, because it is so easy to slip into that. But I'm not a New York Times bestseller like this person yet, and I don't have the following that this. So it's so easy to slip down into that negative space. And then when you do hit, a community negative bump, it can be horrendous. I remember a couple of years ago, there was this woman who plagiarized from about 90 authors. She was taking bits and pieces of their books and mashing them all together and selling her own books. And she actually won a REDA award for one of these books, which was plagiarized. And one of her readers picked up on it. And then they started going back through this woman's books, and they found that she had done it to everybody. And she had plagiarized people like Danielle Steele, my favorite author, Karen Monning.
Did they take the award back?
Yeah, they stripped her of the, and I believe Nora Roberts, who is one of the most prolific writers in the romance industry, she plagiarized from her. So they went after her. This woman, when you start getting into copyright laws and things like that, she lived in, I believe, South America. And so her books were stripped from Amazon. And yeah, she plagiarized from like that. But it was everybody knew about it. Everybody was nasty about it. Everybody, and it was, the woman blamed her ghostwriters. She said that it was her ghostwriters who did it. And so then she's got her ghostwriters who come forward and say, no, she handed us these passages and said, just cobble them into a book. We had no idea they were from somebody else. So, then this whole, and I have been a ghostwriter. I have written books for other people and their names are on it. even though I wrote it. So
I know what a ghostwriter is. If you would have asked me a year ago what a ghostwriter is, I thought it was a writing
yeah, not
about
a lot
ghosts.
of people do know what that is. And then they find out and they feel very strongly about it. Like my names are on my books. And yes, that's wonderful. There are some people who, they don't know how to write. So they hire somebody to do it for them. Um, and I used to do that as well. So then you had the ghostwriting community being attacked of, well, ghostwriters are just cheats and they're frauds and they're, no, we were paid to do something for, and it was a contract and you sign a non-disclosure agreement. And you write these books and they sell them with their name on them. So, it got really, really bad. Very dark, very, very negative. And I know that there has been legal action, I believe, brought against this woman for copyright infringement and breach of copyright laws, which is, so when it gets bad in the writing community, just like any other, like politics, like religion, like it can get really nasty. And that just brings it back to, we need to remember how to people and how to interact with one another, even when we don't agree about something. And not necessarily, I would say, just agree to disagree. Yes, we need to get to that point, but at the same time, I think we need to disagree for a little while so that we really, that's why I will talk to people that don't have the same views as I do. Why do you feel the way that you do? Why do you think the way that you think? You might not, and I think what we're trying to do is anytime we get into a disagreement with somebody, we're trying to change their opinion to match our own. And that is not what a disagreement should be. I think a disagreement should be you're both expressing respectfully your opinions, and then you're realizing, you know what, it is different from mine, but that's okay. It does not have to change my opinion. I can go about my merry life and do my thing. But I understand where they're coming from now. And I think we've forgotten how to do that.
I agree with you 100%, but I start smiling because there's a voice in the back of my head that goes, just say you disagree, damn it. Just say it so we can go.
Agree with her.
But I think this is
That's just called being ornery.
This is a thing I think is important that you said about, like, they took the award back and all this stuff too from that person, is that like plagiarism, we've been told, I think, taught through school that plagiarism is bad. 100% it is, but it gets rooted out. The writing community is pretty positive from what I've come across, at least in supportive ways. The issue is it's easier to root out if someone's not supposed to be there. And not saying that not everyone should be open to, accepting everybody into a writing community, but someone who's maybe not necessarily supposed to be there, as a fact of like, they're just taking and trying to use someone else's success like a parasite. The comedian let me just real quick and then you can hop in. I don't edit these, so we're not arguing. We're just talking. Okay. But for Joe Rogan, for instance, he got into a fight with a famous comedian, and that guy was only stealing bits from everybody else. And later they all found out that he was doing that. It gets rooted out because that dude's not meant to do that. He ended up doing something else and being pretty successful at it. He just saw this as a quick way to fame or a quick way to popularity. Same thing with writing. You could take writing from somebody else, but it eventually gets rooted out. Podcasting is just different because it's people talking for a quick couple hour show or something like that. Like, you can check through all my episodes. I'm exactly the same person. I don't know if I could be anybody really else, just a curious 23-year-old kid. I mean, at the time when I started, was probably in my 20s, but it's different. Like when podcasts say, I'm going to support you and say all these things to you, and then they don't do it. And you're like, hang on a second. You were following all my followers, and then you unfollowed. And it's like, it doesn't make sense. It's weird to rift out, which is acting too. You can keep up good movies and good personas, but then when they try and hang out with you afterwards and you're an asshole, like, oh, this person's only good on screen, it gets rooted out because it's one of those true crafts like writing is. You're not going to be able to keep that facade up forever. It's going to be found out eventually, and it sucks that it has to take a while and someone might win an award or something, but it's truly a bunch of people, just especially if you're willing to do it. Like for me, I've been told, write a book. I'm like, fuck no, I'm not writing a book. That shit's hard as hell. I can write, but I don't enjoy doing it. I'm not meant for it. I'm not meant to sit there and like people that go, I have to do this, I have to do this, I've just like, the fact that you're saying have to kind of scares me, because it's like, if you're forcing yourself, I get it. If you enjoy doing it, but you have to force to get that past that writer's block or whatever, I understand that. But I mean, in the concept of like, I hate fucking writing, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to make a book because someone told me to. And it's like, then you're forcing yourself to do something you might not want to enjoy. We go to 9 to 5 jobs. That's not fun for a lot of us. So you're forcing yourself to do that. So you should be doing something that you're passionate and you actually love to do. When you put the pen to paper and you feel your voice can truly be released, the same reason when I start talking and I'm not even thinking about the next word that's coming out of my mouth, it just starts going. And I'm like, you know what? If it lands, it lands. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. In terms of rooting people out, I've seen this in the writing community as well. And especially now we're seeing a lot of cancel culture. If you don't fit with our views, we're just, we're not going to buy your books. We're not going to support you in any way. A great example is J.K. Rowling and her views on the transgender community. I don't
bet
know.
all those people read Harry Potter. I bet
I don't know that she could ever be canceled, but it's a lot of, she's going to be stricken. Her name is stricken from this group, or we're not going to buy her books or yet. That's also her career. I don't agree with her about her views. I grew up on Harry Potter. My son loves Harry Potter. I wish she was a bit more, that our views were more in line, but they're not. There's nothing I can do about that. Does
Lydia,
that
we're
mean
gonna
I know, right? Does that mean that I'm going to stop loving Harry Potter? No. That was my childhood. So yes, in terms of rooting people out, I think one of the things that you said of, is this person supposed to be here in regard to the woman who was breaching copyright law? I don't have an issue if she's a writer. I don't have an issue if she wants to publish. I have I have been told you don't belong here myself. And that really does something, to your self image, in terms of defining who you are and what you're passionate about. And it takes a lot to get over that. However, there was no effort made to do this, career, project, hobby, whatever, without breaking the law, without taking other people's work to try to bring herself to
Parasite.
Yeah. So it's not a matter of she doesn't belong in the writing community. It's a question of how she went about doing it. Had she attempted to do her own books, or even if she wanted to use a ghostwriter, if she could not write, use a ghostwriter. Having been a ghostwriter, I'm on both sides of this fence. So yes, it's not that she doesn't belong there. It's she ostracized herself from the community with what she did. So yeah.
I have a question.
Calling on the class, yes.
So for your book, for instance, you made it into a copy, right? Like a physical copy.
Yes.
Okay. And you're meant to do it.
Yeah.
That's simple. You had the passion that I'm going to do this. Even if you had someone like, here's all my papers, just turn it into a book. No, I would not go that far. That's why I'm not meant to be a writer. I can write, sure, but I don't want to turn it into a book. I don't want to do that type of stuff. There's people out there that want to take credit. Like if I took credit for a bunch of other, like I'll even mention if I hear something and I'm repeated on my podcast, I swear to God, I will try my best to remember where that came from and say it on here. Like, I don't want to get this wrong. I've gotten a lot wrong. But I will try my best to cite where it comes from, because there's a factor of people when it means being in it. If you're going to work hard, if you're going to turn it into a physical copy, which to me is hard work, it might be an easy process, but just doing all that, paying the money, whatever you have to do to get it done, that's tasking. And that's a lot of work. And I don't have the time because Dragon City is too important in my life. But that's to me a sign that you meant to do it and you actually care about it. People that care about things get discouraged from doing them because they see how hard it is. But if you truly care about it, I just think the process is the issue isn't them. The issue is that it's too damn hard to try and do what you want to do in life. That's just the plain flat out and simple.
I actually had, and I fully believe that everybody should have a therapist because they're wonderful. I had a therapist and she said to me, nobody ever does anything that they don't really want to do. If you didn't want to do it, you wouldn't do it. And that's a really good, like, say, for example, taking out the trash. You have to take out the trash. Well, no, I don't have to. I can let the trash sit there and build up until it spills over and it stinks. And then I have to, I must wash the kitchen floor, whatever. You don't, you don't do something that you don't want to do, plain and simple. That's just not how people work. It might seem tasking, yes, but you eventually get to the point where you want to take out the trash because you don't want to deal with the mess. You don't want to have to clean it up. You don't want to you don't want to have to, quote unquote, do these things. So there comes a point, even if we realize it consciously or subconsciously, we do end up wanting to take out the trash because we don't want to deal with those consequences. So it's a want and have, or need to and must, are very interesting words. And as a writer, I really enjoy looking at both of them and how they pair together and play against each other. But people do not do the things they don't want to do. Nobody forces anybody to. It's a subconscious decision that eventually we do these things that we must do, because we don't want to deal with the consequences if we don't do them.
It's
So
funny
it
you
was
said that because I thought of dishes. I was like, somebody when I was a little kid told me it was like a video game where you're scrubbing off the dishes. And then it's just been in my head every time I'm doing it. I think of playing a video game. I don't want to do it, but I like the game. And I'm
yeah,
like, oh my God. So I'm just doing
play the
dishes. They
game.
Freudian me or whatever that term is.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to do the dishes, you want to play the game. So you make the dishes into the game. And I love that. Yeah. I actually had the thought a minute ago when you were talking about not wanting to create a book and it's tasking for you and things like that. And I said, oh, he should hire somebody because he's a great storyteller. And
I'm a
I think
storyteller.
you are, yes, you orate. You remind me of my son. He hates writing. He does not like the process of sitting down at a table and pen in hand, paper in front of him and writing words. But he could sit here and talk to me all day and tell me, and I did this and they did it. And I'm like, and I'm sitting here listening to his stories and I'm like, he's an amazing storyteller. You're an orator as opposed to a writer. So you are a great storyteller. You just present it in a different format.
Oh, see, I think of it like I'm a leech and I'm just sucking off
Yeah,
your
no,
experiences and stuff.
no, actually, you're a very good storyteller. I picked up on that pretty much right away. So that was my thought. I was like, oh, you should hire somebody to help him write a story because it would be a very good one. And do a collaborative effort. I think you'd be very good at it. But
Or like you said something interesting about like sometimes that writer's block, for instance, and then it kind of just hits you. I get like that with creating t-shirts. Like this morning I made a shirt with it's the theater faces, like the happy and sad, but I did 3 on top that are happy and 3 on the bottom that are sad, and they're just different colors, like the color clashing and stuff. Put it on a shirt and then I just reversed them and then put it on like a second style in case people wanted the sad faces on top and the things at the bottom. I was like, but you can pull deep meaning out of that. People on top are usually sad, and then people on the bottom sometimes are happy. There's a weird thing, and that's why I shifted them around too, because it can be the opposite way as well too. I think it's interesting because that just hits me out of nowhere. That's like I enjoy doing it. I do it like that. Same with podcasting. When it's talking, like I say, when it's a conversation, we all enjoy having conversations. Most of us do on the right day. I'm not going to lie. There are some days where I'm like, I don't want to talk to shit. I just want to sit down and eat a muffin. That's all I want to do.
very much do not talk to me until I've had coffee. And I was running late this morning and I'm like, shit, I have to I'm just bringing the coffee with me because otherwise it's just not going to be pretty. And I'm going to sit here through this whole podcast like, huh? So,
I think it's important because if you look at the things that people want to do and then they look at what they have to do to pay the bills, it's sadly they're few and far between. Sometimes people aren't doing the things that they want to do. Most of us, at least I would say, aren't doing the things that we want to do,
I,
except if you're a writer.
I would say it's a choice. I chose not to go into the 9 to 5 career and and slog away through Monday through Friday to pay the bills. Are there consequences to that? Yes. This career is very hard. It is very difficult to be lucratively successful to pay the bills. So I've had to find other means to make ends meet, such as the ghostwriting and the freelance editing, because I know that it doesn't pay the bills. So that is, I think anybody that has to go to a 9 to 5 job and not pursue the things that they're passionate about, that's a choice. And I know that there are a lot of people who will disagree with me. Well, I can't. Well, actually you can. it doesn't mean that you're going to be comfortable. It might be very difficult to live. And I have the last few years found it to be difficult to pursue this career in terms of financial success. It is very hard, but it is a choice that I make because I know that if I made the choice to do the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday as customer service, and I worked in customer service and yeah, that's, I can't, I don't even have words for that, but I commend people who do it because I'd done it before and it would kill me. It would just completely extinguish everything, passionate and on fire and the things that I love about life. It would completely squash that in me. And I refuse to make that choice to do that. It is a choice. I think we also have the responsibility to ourselves to understand that there are consequences with that choice. It is going to be hard, and you may have to consider alternative means to be financially secure. But everybody has that choice to pursue the things that they're passionate about. It's whether or not you have the will to do it. And some people might not have that strong, might not be that strong-willed. And that's unfortunate because I think that just comes back to whether or not they're happy in life. And I think people who don't consider the things that they love to do and they don't pursue them, I worry that they're very sad in life. And I feel for them
I'm
because
sad for other reasons, but
I choose to do things that make me happy.
I
So
think that's what I really like about you is that, I mean, besides you have a wonderful name, by the way, Lydia.
thank
It's
you.
just,
Thank you.
but I think it's important because like to me, value, I'd rather live bare bones, like just making every check. Like that's okay to me. As
Mhm.
long as I'm doing something that I love to do. Like I'm a fitness guy. So my job is at a gym. I've got a job at a gym, but then I started to realize like, is this really for me? Like I've been working out every day for 9 years and now I'm really not liking it anymore. It's not giving me the relief because I turned it into my job. And now it's like I never leave there. And it's like I started to kind of realize like I like the podcasting. I don't want to turn this into a career. I gave up a radio position because I don't care. I don't want to. This is fun for me. I don't want to turn this into a job that turns into a bills. It'd be cool to live on. I'd rather make money off making shirts because I make some bomb ass shit. Uh, but at the same time, I look at it like I don't need a whole lot. I think actually you need less than you think you do. But is all this stuff and you're working at a miserable job or something you hate, does that make does that just seems like doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have almost nothing, just enough to get by, but be so incredibly happy that I don't have to go sit in an office that would be so hard for me to do, or do something like work out in the sun 24/7, lifting things and hurting myself physically, where I'm 40 years old, I can't even get out of my bed. I'd rather do something that I love and be like, well, hey, I'm not starving. I'm showering. I have my hygiene. I have all these important things, but it's so hard because you see everything on social media. That's like, I just bought a Mercedes. And you're like, fuck you. I don't give a shit about your Mercedes. That's exactly what I think every time I see an ad.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you about the job. I worked at Barnes and Noble for a year, and by the end, I hated it. And Barnes and Noble was my go-to place. I would go sit and write there. I would go just browse for hours because books are my thing. I'm a bookaholic. I mean, that is my one of the most important things in my life. And it became a job. It was not fun. It was miserable, and it turned into every time I come into work, somebody in the cafe had called out, so I had to go fill in the cafe. And I don't want to be a barista for a living. That's not my passion. So I wanted to work with books, and it was being taken away from that. And then when I would manage to get on the book floor, it was that I enjoyed that more. Then you got into the customer service aspect, and so it wasn't that the customers were bad. I mean, I can't really think of anybody. I mean, around Christmas time, people get a little testy, but um, you know, it
It's just the
it was
season.
a job. It was a job. It wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't my place anymore. And so I got done that job. And I went, I think I took a month where I didn't go back, and then I found myself starting to miss it. and I started going back, and it was my place again. It was my, go there, de-stress, just a happy place for me. So I definitely understand where you can kind of get into those jobs where it becomes mundane and stressful, and it's just not fun anymore. So yeah, I did try to do that, but I found within the publishing industry, there hasn't been a lot yet that I haven't enjoyed doing. So I think if you can find the job where, yes, it's still work, but you enjoy doing it, that's the career for you. And this has really been where I found myself within the publishing industry.
Because
So
you're meant for it. I'm telling you. It's like I said, if I
yeah.
was a owner of a company, some dude came in and said, I have all these degrees for this job, and I would be the best to work for your company. And I'm like, okay, well, what about working this schedule? I don't work, only work 3 days a week. And it's like, all right, I get it. You're probably more experienced than the kid that wants to work every day that has no experience at all, but he's passionate about it. And he's going to go out after work and study at home and get interested into it at home. It seems like my better offer, better long shot on that one.
I know. I love the clients, my editing clients, and they come to me at like 3 a.m. in the morning, and they probably think, I'm gonna answer them, but the next morning or something like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this. And they're like, wait, you're awake? Yes. Yeah,
That's how I am.
let's do this. Let's go. And I have had that happen before where a client has posed a question or something like that, and I'm on the phone and I'm like, okay, what are you talking, let's do, and they're like, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, you texted me, let's do this, let's go. Yeah, I think if you can definitely find something that you just absolutely love to do, then it doesn't become work. It just becomes something that you're doing every day that you love to do.
Yeah, that's a couldn't explain it any better than that. But where can people find your book, your podcast? Yes, we're gonna get to that.
Sure. So I have a website, which is www.lydia and then the hyphen, so -stevens.com. You can find me on Twitter at author_Lydia. You can find me on Facebook under Lydia Stevens. As far as the podcast, it is the REDinkwriters podcast. You can find us on Twitter. We're also on Facebook. So yeah, that's where you can find me. So if you're looking for the books that I put out, I am the author of the Ginger Davenport Escapades. Why me? Why should I? Why not? And we definitely explore some of those things that we were talking about today, of Ginger kind of coming out of her shell and figuring out what she loves to do with life. And it's paranormal. And then I have a pre-release of Highway to Hell. And that is book 1 of the Hellfire series. And this is going to be a re-release. I had published that book as well as the next one, South of Heaven, West of Hell's Bells, a couple of years ago with an independent publisher. And they went,
an AC/DC fan?
I am, yes. So it's like Sons of Anarchy meets Ghost Rider. With a little bit of a love story thrown in, but yeah, so that's the Hellfire series, and it's definitely it's about demon reaper. She works for Satan, and she's trying to atone for her sins so she can go to heaven, and her job is to go out into the human world and collect the souls of the damned and bring them back to hell. And so in book 1 she comes across the soul of an innocent has been marked. So does she bring the soul in so she can atone for her sins, or does she stand by and do nothing and go against Satan? So that is what book 1 is about, and I will be re-releasing that on June 22nd. That drops. I believe you can get the paperback right now, but the ebook is pre-order right now.
I have a question.
And yeah, and then I'll be re-releasing South of Heaven, West of Hell's Bells, and then going from there with the rest of the series.
Did you make the Ghost Rider, the devil working for the devil? Did you make her like how they make every like sexy hot demon, or did you make them badass, like where it's like, because every time they stab or they kill somebody or they take a soul, it's like, how are they doing that and still staying that good looking? Where's the blood on the jacket? Where's the real shit? I want to see that.
I think she gets puked on in chapter 1. She's badass, and I say that they've definitely got the. And if you look at the new cover for Highway to Hell, it has the Hellcat sigil, which is on their leather jackets. And it's the skull of a Hellcat. And when I say that, it's, you know what a hellhound is? These ladies are demon shapeshifters. They turn into flaming, they're almost like saber-toothed tigers, in their demon form. And then, they look like people in the human world, obviously. But yeah, I would say she's more badass than, she's mid-30s. And she died mid-30s. And she's been working for Lucifer for about 5 years, so kind of technically 40-ish. But yeah, there is going to be an underlying romance with the son of Satan, but it's not the integral part of the story. The big part of the story is about atonement and redemption. And we never really talk about, like, I remember being brought up in the Baptist church, and, this is what you do to get to heaven. This is what you do, this is how you go to hell. Nobody ever really talked about, if you don't lead a good life and you go to hell, what happens next. And so when I was writing this series, when I started this series, I was like, is there ever the opportunity for somebody who's done bad things to atone for them and to be able to go to heaven? And so what happens if it's too late? And that's where the idea of this came from. And I was like, she's working for Lucifer, and she's going to be able to go to heaven. And then, so yeah, that's kind of the premise of book one. And the arc story of the entire series. There's going to be 6 books.
I always just wonder, because like I'm wearing white right now, like this white jacket, but I'm not going outside like this. Like that's gonna get sturdy so quick. I watch movies all the time. They're wearing a white shirt. Dude flips from a truck, hits the ground, gets road burn. He gets up, his shirt's still like tied fresh white. I'm like, hang on a second. Where's the skid marks, man?
I think she gets puked on in chapter 1. And yeah, she's definitely one of the things that I love about writing is the little details that people forget. Like at one point, one of the books in my shoes, this bitch needs a shower, because and so she has to have a shower. But yeah, people don't really think about those little minute details. But yeah, she does get grungy. She's not afraid of getting some blood on her. Yeah, book 1 is, she get.
I like how you talk about it, because you look off in the corner and smile.
Yeah, I am not going to give everything away. So if you want the book, like I said, kind of Ghostwriter versus meets Sons of Anarchy, Highway to Hell. You can find me, Lydia Stevens, any social media platform, really. I'm even on LinkedIn. Right? Who's on LinkedIn now? I don't even know what people.
I am. I still get emails on it, but I don't ever use it.
Yeah, Facebook. I have an author page as well as a personal one. Yep, and I'm on Instagram, Pinterest, Amazon, Goodreads. You can find, Lydia Stevens, Ginger Davenport Escapades, and the Hellfire series.
You hit me with that Pinterest, like a left hook. I was like, hang on, she just.
Who does Pinterest now anymore? I use that for inspirational boards, but I haven't done a lot with it, but I am there. BookBub, yeah, that's me.
Well, Lydia, I'm going to link it all in the description for our listeners that heard it all, but they want to find the actual link instead of typing it in. Like, guys, just put in the work and you type in the link and then you get it. But I'll link it in the description as well, too. And thanks for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast.